Several years ago, I started a small collection of old dog training books and was surprised to find that a lot of that advice is still valid to this day. In this video, I'm going to talk about Er Shelley's books entitled 20th Century Bird Dog Training, written in 1921, and his second bird dog training book, Bird Dog Training Today and Tomorrow. Please stay until the end because I want to start a discussion in the comment section about how e-collars and GPS collars have changed what dogs are bred. Er Shelley was a professional dog trainer and very successful field trialer who handled the winner at the 1906 National Championship at Grand Junction. Nash Buckingham wrote the foreword in Shelley's second book, and in it, Nash refers to Shelley as not a professional trainer, but a professional breaker of gun dogs. I've heard that people say that years ago dogs were broken, but today's dogs are trained, which just simply means that today we typically use a lot less pressure. What makes Shelley really important is that he was the first trainer in the U.S. to write about using planted birds for dog training. He correctly predicted that using planted birds would become the commonplace in the future, and that was why his second edition was renamed Bird Dog Training Today and Tomorrow. Before planting birds were used, dogs had to be trained on wild birds only, but Shelley points out that with planted birds, 1, training can be done at any time of the year. 2, there are no unproductive workouts because each dog has an opportunity to find birds. 3, training doesn't require a lot of land. 4, he acknowledges the conservation aspect by saying that no wild birds are sacrificed. And lastly, 5, Shelley said that he could break dogs better and in less time. Less time because of the efficiency of planted birds, but Shelley also felt that by working dogs in front of other dogs staked out on a chain gang, that the dogs on the chain gang were actually learning too. Shelley felt so strongly about dogs watching other dogs in training that when he did work dogs on wild birds, he had an assistant walk behind them with 2 dogs coupled together so that they could see the other dogs work their birds. While there are some significant, and I mean significant, differences in how dogs were trained, I'm going to read some of the excerpts from his book so that you can see a few of those differences, but mostly I'm going to discuss the concepts and practices that are still used today. Shelley was an advocate for letting pups run loose on farms with wild birds if possible. He said that those dogs would, quote, store up knowledge in the art of hunting and will make wiser and better bird dogs, end quote. I've no doubt that this is true, but unfortunately, so few of us have access to a lot of wild birds today, although this would be an argument for sending our pups north to the prairies in the summer. He continues by saying, quote, if possible, leave the puppy on the farm until he's past a year old. The best age to start their training is from 1 to 2 years old, end quote. His experience was that younger dogs had to be broken again their second season. Now, I've heard that back then trainers waited until dogs were a little older due to the vaccines being unavailable because, well, I put so much effort in on a dog if there's a chance it's going to die from one of the common diseases of that day. But Shelley, he said that he waited because he felt the training was more permanent when you started with an older dog. Shelley recognizes how every dog is an individual and says that, quote, nearly every dog requires slightly different handling than others, end quote. He said that, quote, when you start hunting your newly trained dog, the handler must make up his mind to forgo the pleasure of shooting. Training and shooting do not go well together, end quote. He acknowledged how important it was to kill birds for your dog, but that the birds should be killed over points and not when the dog is flushing birds purposefully or even accidentally. As for gun intro, Shelley says, quote, I have an ironclad rule to be used with every dog that's introduced to gunfire. Never, under any circumstances, fire a shot unless the dog is chasing. He continues with gun intro by writing, take the dog hunting and don't interfere with him in any way. When birds are found, chances are your dog will promptly flush and chase them. This is your opportunity for a shot. He said, let him get fairly well away, fire a light load, and then walk away as if nothing had happened. Sound advice then and now. Shelley says do not work the young dog too long. 30 minutes to an hour is plenty, and that you should put him up after he's just worked on game. The birds will remain fresh in his mind until the next workout, and trainers today still prefer to put a dog up on a good note. While there is no record of Shelley wearing one of the many technical upland vests with multiple water bottles, the matter of keeping dogs hydrated was a concern for trainers even 100 years ago. Shelley says, should there be no water near you, a small canteen of it can be carried and a dented felt hat can be used to form a dish. Shelley acknowledged that birds are the best trainers and said to, quote, try to get the doggone birds every time you take them out. Allow them to chase for several days. The dog should find out by experience that birds cannot be caught and will eventually begin pointing without any help from you, end quote. Reminds me of a YouTube video I saw somewhere. Shelley was an advocate of handling the dog on point, just like many of today's trainers are. He wrote, quote, the more you handle him on point, the stauncher and more rigid he will become. So make it a rule to always walk to the dog and stroke him before flushing the birds, end quote. Shelley talks about range and that dogs have a natural range, and close, medium, and wide-ranging dogs all have their place. He liked close dogs for grouse, woodcock, and pheasant, but for all other game birds, he said, quote, the demand for medium-ranging dogs far exceed the demand for close and wide-hunting dogs combined because they are a happy medium between the other dogs, end quote. Regarding the dog's natural range, Shelley thought it was hard to alter, and for that reason, he wrote, quote, one should not buy a puppy for any hunting unless a careful consideration is taken of the ranging qualities of the immediate ancestors. I think this is still sound advice today, and I know of strains of setters, like many Llewellyns, that hunt close, while there are others that routinely can be hunted from horseback. The same can be said of short hairs. You got some litters where I think all the dogs will hunt between 50 and 100 yards, and then others, they might be 300 and 400 yard dogs. Shelley spent several pages talking about how to force fetch your dog to retrieve. And other than using direct pressure on the dog's paw versus a toe hitch or an ear pinch, and other than working on a bended knee instead of a training table, his instructions are essentially identical to the many trainers that still train today before an e-collar is overlaid. Interestingly, he contributes, David Sanborn is the one who created this method, and he said Mr. Sanborn was using this method in the 80s, the 1880s. Shelley's book ends by saying, no two persons are alike and no two dogs are alike. Methods that may be successful with one dog will not work equally well with another. If the trainer is patient but persistent, it will not be long until the dog will learn exactly what's wanted and will cheerfully do his work, end quote. Well, there certainly are new methods and new tools available to trainers today, but after reading Shelley's book, I can see why he was so successful and in such demand as a dog trainer of his time. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this historical look at dog training, and please leave me a comment as to how today's dogs might differ from the dogs of 100 years ago. Have remote training collars and GPS collars changed how dogs are bred or which dogs are bred? And has it helped or hurt our dogs? And of course, if you like this content, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.